probably actually, either if they didn't plan it from the beginning, the New World Order is totally behind him staying in prison. There were a lot of weird New World Order connections with the kids involved and the other people who just happened to be involved with this, the weird case. Somebody worked for Bechtel, somebody's dad worked at Lawrence Livermore Lab, somebody's uncle, it just goes on and on and on. The tentacles just keep going out, and it was just crazy. But he had a lousy, his lawyer did a lousy job, and all the evidence was circumstantial. And at first they tried to say he was trying to overthrow Marin County, which was ludicrous. And then they just, dropped that and said he killed this guy because the guy owed him money. The guy did owe him money, but he wouldn't have killed him for $2,500. He was making plenty of money with his military stuff. So anyway, people always ask me how I got involved with Mark and all this UFO stuff. And they want me to write a book, and I'm sure I will. I've started it. But, I grew up in the 50s where you watched UFO movies and the Martian invasion and the little kids and everybody would, I can't even remember what it was, Invasion from Mars. And they walked to the end of this fence and they all, dropped down into the earth. And, that was my experience with UFOs. I watched these B-rated movies, and that was it. And then I forgot all about it. And then I meet Mark, and my roommate at the time came home. Her husband was in the same prison. So I met this guy whose mom was visiting today. He's really smart. He's friends with Ricky. Do you want to go see him? I said, sure, why not? Prison doesn't scare me. I've already visited your husband. I was visiting other people, as a thing to do. So it was, I met Mark. We started writing, and then a couple of months later, in November, we started writing in September, and in November, we started visiting. So basically, we courted for 5 years. We've been married for 13 years. He's the smartest man I know. He's very kind. He's charming. He's got a great sense of humor. He can tell a great story. I will just say that unequivocally, I know that all this stuff about UFOs and aliens is totally true. I have physical evidence around the house that it's true. And intuitively, especially after knowing this guy this long, I just know it's true. That being said, he didn't start off on our first date or even our first letter saying, hey, this is what I used to do in the military. He did say his dad was in the Air Force. I'm sure he told me he'd been in the military, and that's kind of where we left it. And we just got to know each other. And then, I'm doing some research for a family history. Can you look this up for me? Can you look that up? It's like, okay, sure. It's like, oh, Mark, why isn't my printer freezing when I'm trying to print something about your dad? Oh, I don't know. And then he started giving me reports that I started a publishing company through his mentoring. And because he used to be a publisher, he had some great front companies. He would use his talents to start businesses because he needed fronts. So he had a magazine, he had a movie company, he had a remodeling construction business. But anyway, he helped me start a publishing company in the late 90s. I published a couple of his fiction books that he's written. I published a newspaper and a literary magazine. A lot of fun, no money in it, but it was a lot of fun. And because again, among anything else, the guy's an incredible writer, and he's known a lot of good writers in the prison system. So I used to, we used to help them out, and I would publish some of their stories. And, we like to help people. We like to educate people. Anyway, several years into this relationship, he started giving me reports, and finally I started reading them, and it's like, oh, you've been to space. Oh, what did you do? So that was pretty weird and pretty unusual. But I remember one day he said, oh, why don't you go down to the USS Hornet and do an interview for your paper? That would be a cool place for people to go visit. It's like, okay. So I did the whole press tour, heard all about its World War II history, and it's a cool place. I love going to visit there because they're always restoring more parts of it. They're always restoring new planes and different things. So it's just a fun place to take your family and friends and go visit. Then another time, he said, oh, I hear there's a psychic that's going to be speaking in Berkeley. Now, mind you, I was living and working up in the foothills, so, 2 or 3 hours, several hours away from Berkeley. And he said, she's going to be talking about the ghosts on the horn. It's like, okay. So I went and I met her, and we hit it off immediately. And so one day she took me over to the Hornet, like right as they were closing. So the public was all leaving, but she was a regular docent and a paranormal investigator that was allowed to, stay on the Hornet after hours. And we started walking around, and I'm getting chills. So we started walking around, and in the main hangar bay, especially when nobody's there, there's a whole bunch of ghosts that come out. And it's so cool because there's a lot of ghosts that come out, and I mean, they might have died on the ship, but some of them never even worked on never were even on that ship. But I mean, I've had my own ghost experiences. I saw my first ghost there, and so that was pretty cool. But back to the alien part, because again, we'll do UFOs ghosts another day. But back to the alien part, Mark had said, don't go tell me what you feel by the medical bay. And they hadn't restored the medical bay, so we couldn't go in there. But when we got by there, it's like I put my hands up to the door. It's like, ooh, really negative energy. So, I mean, the guy knows what he's talking about. Turns out that they had a confrontation on that ship after one of their missions. They'd taken some aliens aboard, and they'd had, hand-to-hand combat with them, and some of the aliens had been taken to the medical bay. So there had been a lot of negative energy there, and they have cleared all that out now, which is nice. You can go through the medical bay, but it's still really interesting. So then let's see, in 2004, Mark goes, well, I hear there's going to be a UFO conference down in the Bay Area. Why don't you go? It's like, okay. And, oh, by the way, why don't you see if anybody's talking about reptilians? It's like, okay, honey, whatever you say. And so I went to my first UFO conference, the Bay Area UFO Expo. I loved it. I heard all these speakers, and I had never been, like I said, I've been out of this loop for years, and I started listening to these speakers. I go, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this makes sense. And yes, by then I had read some of Mark's stuff. I already knew some of the stuff he had done. He'd written, one of the first things he wrote out for me to sell was about a space battle called the Battle of Vesta. And, here I'm reading all about him going into space with our deep space fleet and having first contact with aliens, then having a space battle with other aliens. It's like, and reading about him almost dying. So it's like, whoa. So anyway, I went, and that year I met Richard Dolan, and really, was fascinated. Well, no, I was totally impressed that here's a guy with does all this research, and he could verify a lot of the things that Mark had talked about, because Richard Dolan in his books mentions several, he's got snippets of things about that Mark was involved in, and then Mark has gone on to write much longer essays and books about these episodes, so it verifies it. And Mark has used some of Richard's quotes from his books, and it just goes right along with, and right down to, in Richard's book, one of them, he lists the sighting of the big UFO sighting when Mark was a baby, and it's like 2 months to the date after Mark was born. So, it's just great. And then John Rhodes was speaking at that conference, so it was the first time I heard anybody speaking about reptilians. I'm going, oh wow, this is really cool. This is, making a lot of sense. By the next year, I had my own booth. I, was talking to people for the first time about, my husband's been in space. He's done this. People are just going, whoa. And I, was making new friends, and people were bringing people over to the booth going, you've got to listen to this woman. It's like, and I didn't know nearly as much as I know now, because, we've been at this for 10 years. I've been at this for 10 years. And it's getting so much easier to talk about now. But anyway, so I kept having booths at the Bay Area UFO Expo. I had booths at the Conspiracy Con. In 2007, I went to England for the first time and spoke at the Probe UK conference there. In a couple weeks, I'm going back to speak there for my 4th time. I'm also going to be speaking at the UFO Academy. I've spoken at the Cornwall UFO Research Organization's conference. That was 2 years ago. I have to say the people in England love me, and I love being there, but it's so wonderful to be able to share Mark's history, and it's not just his, it's like the military's been doing all this incredibly secret stuff, and it's fascinating to me, and it's history, so that's why I like sharing it. So, so that's how I got involved. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I keep telling people now, it's like, okay, I'd like to do my bookkeeping business about not 20 more years, maybe 10 more years, keep saving up for retirement. And then, I'd like to retire, maybe do that part-time, but do this whole UFO stuff more and more full-time. So I can just get out there, have the research center that we want really going well, and just get out and do as much talking as possible. So what is Earth Defense Headquarters? It is a nonprofit with 501c3 status, and I have a research center here in Northern California. We have a website, and the main purpose is to educate people about little-known history, about lots of topics. It was starting out to be a lot of environmental stuff and the military stuff, and mainly now I focus on the military history, cryptozoology, magic, witchcraft, the fairy realm, the elementals, because it's all basically tied together in one way or other, and it's all fascinating to me, and I love it. It's truly my passion. So I have a DVD set that we sell of different talks that I did in Philadelphia one year. I have lots of reports that Mark he's a prolific writer, and I know, I would love for him to be speaking here in person to you, and everybody would love that. But thank you for letting me be the spokesperson for at least this time. But he keeps writing, and he keeps writing and writing and writing, which is great because we keep getting more and more information. And as I said, he is tuned into a lot of current stuff, and people think he's out of the loop, but he's truly not, because he listens to the news, he reads lots of magazines, and he still has human contact. He still has contact with humans in the intelligence agencies. So what are we going to be talking about on this show if it continues to go forward? And I hope it does, because we hope you're going to support it and donate and help us fund it and really get it going. I want to talk more about the different missions that he's been on, both in space and on Earth. I want to tell you more about at least the 2 interspecies conferences that he's been involved with as an adult, because I don't know, he was 19 or 20. He was at a conference in 1971 in Iran, mostly working security. He didn't get to a lot of meetings, but I'm going to be talking about that conference when I go to England in a couple weeks. But it really gets into, the reasons why we've, been able to go into space, and why we haven't been able to go into space, and maybe why more of us haven't seen aliens up close and personal. So, I mean, there are treaties in place, and, there are people breaking the treaties, but there are treaties in place that cover a lot of this stuff, and it's huge politically. We're going to talk about stuff, or UFO activity and other cool historical things that have gone on in the Bay Area that people don't know about. What used to fly into the Marin Headlands, what secret things are at Hamilton Air Force Base. What conference did they have here in 1970, right after, we'd gone to the moon the year before? What ship is lying down at the bottom of the Monterey Trench that's out near the Farallones? We're going to talk about paranormal stuff, because I know Mark's had some experiences, but I've actually had several of my own, ghost experiences, which is amazingly cool. I have the ability to, sometimes I see that, I don't see them as in their human form, but I see the shadows. I can definitely sense that they're there. And it's happened to me in numerous places, and I've often been with a psychic who can see them in human form. So it's like, I'll say, okay, well, somebody's here, and she can say yes and fill in the details. Or, we were both at Dover Castle one time, and and the ghost just basically passed right through me. It's like, whoa. Anyway, so we got lots of stuff we can talk about. We can talk about cryptozoology and fairies and all kinds of cool stuff. And especially we can talk about alien species. And if you will put up, please, the gastrocell and then the raptor, that would be great. Just a couple of the alien species that Mark's been involved with and that I know quite a bit about. And just to, if there's any viewers or listeners out there, I'll be ready for questions in the next little while if you want to throw some up in the chat room. And in the meantime, I decided to call this show News and Clues because there's a lot of stuff going around the world, or a lot of stuff happening around the world, and even the historical stuff, but a lot of current stuff that, it's not that people take it for granted, but there's often a hidden meaning or reason behind what's going on. And I know it's been really interesting. I love it when Carrie comes with me to visit Mark. I mean, it's exhausting for all of us. And but the energy that you see the two of them, it is so amazing because I'm sitting there taking notes and the two of them are just going back and forth, talking as fast as they can about numerous subjects. And, we all know what a great research Carrie is, and she'll bring up something, she'll ask Mark, and, then he'll tell her his insights. And it's just, I love to watch the process. But one of the things I wanted to share, and if nobody asks any questions, I'll keep talking about other stuff. But one of the things I wanted to share is most of you might or might not know that we've had a lot of fires here in California recently. And one huge one has been here predominantly in Lake County called the Valley Fire. And, oh good, there's questions coming in. But anyway, this Valley Fire has burned thousands and thousands of acres, destroyed lots of buildings. 4 or 5 people died, I think. A whole town was destroyed. Harbin Hot Springs was destroyed. And so Mark has taught me one thing, that when there's a disaster that happens, you've got to look and you've got to think, okay, was that natural? Or what really happened while that was going on? And I'll tell you, I hadn't thought much about it till I saw him yesterday. Today's Monday. Yeah, I keep saying that. Today's Monday. And he goes, that wasn't natural. And I'm going to read you really quick a quote that I got in a letter from him today. It says, the Valley Fire is too much like an attack not to look at it with real question. The loss of the big geothermal power plant is at the top of the list, but all of the firefighters are saying that the fire exploded way too quickly to be natural. A lot of very normal people are starting to ask questions about it, and there's some really odd things going on with the fire. And a couple of the things he started to point out were that there were four major vortexes between Clear Lake and Napa. 2 of them were pretty much totally destroyed. They might not come back online for like 100 years. The 2 others were really badly damaged, and it will be hard to restore the energy for at least 10 years. So that is a major loss. That's a major loss. And I have to tell you, the elementals, the fairy world, they're crushed, they're devastated. And even if you don't believe in fairies, and I totally do, that was major for them. That's very magical areas for them, and they're very crushed. Harbin Hot Springs apparently was the site of numerous alien meetings or gatherings. The pool, I don't know if it now or still did these days, but he said it used to have ramps or stairs going into it so that they could just kind of walk down into the water as opposed to having to climb down the little ladders. And they loved it there. And he also said that the forest that was destroyed was like the second line of defense for the Redwood Empire. So if there was ever, he's not saying there's going to be a revolution, he's just saying if there were to ever be a revolution, or, there's a lot of people that talk about the state of California dividing, that would have been, if the first line of defense, which would have been closer to me, got cut off, that would have been the second line of defense. Well, now if the forest is gone, there's no place for you to stand and defend yourself. So I have a question. It says, Joanne, what year did Mark go to Area 51? I believe I know him. Oh, cool. I work in Area 51 and S4. I was there in 75 to 78. Oh, very cool. Okay, well, that would have been right about the right time. I don't know how often he was there. I know of, because again, there's so much he can't tell me, but I do know, and this is a great story. If you've ever heard me speak at all, or if you haven't, we'll talk about her later. But one of the craft that he used to fly was an alien craft that it's from a very ancient civilization. Her initials, we call her the Minerva because it stands for multi-interdimensional, and it's a very long name. Anyway, she was at Area 51, and they were trying to back engineer her, and she wouldn't let anybody get in her. She wouldn't let anybody breach her hull. Mark just talked to her very kindly, and all of a sudden she opened up her hull. She let him in. You navigate like with some kind of mind thing. And that would have been in probably 76, I would imagine, at least, or right before that. And I think Naga was there at the time, and he was starting to train in her and test her and whatever. And there was some kind of gray outside the perimeters who was going to shoot an energy weapon at them. And somebody, maybe Naga, found out about it, told Mark to get out of there. He tells her to jump, and she jumps up to Jupiter or Saturn or someplace far, far away. You have to be careful how you tell her what to do. But then he goes, well, as long as we're out there, she gave me this great education about space. And, what better way to learn about space than to be out there firsthand? So yeah, those definitely would have been the years that he was there. So Kitty, here goes my cat walking across the computer. Sorry. He wants to help. So, I would, if any of you think you know him, I would love to talk to you offline. You're welcome to email me. And my phone's always bugged, but, so's my house, whatever. My life's an open book. But you're welcome to email me or Facebook me or whatever, and I'm happy to talk to you. Let's see, are those pictures of aliens what they look like? So I didn't see what he showed you, but one is a blue blobby thing called the gastrocell, and the other one is a raptor that evolved from the dinosaurs. And yes, that's exactly what they look like. The gastrocell, and again, we're going to spend a whole show talking about the different kinds of aliens, but the gastrocell normally comes from a big colony, and so they look like clouds when they're all together. This one in particular had come to the England conference that he was at as a little boy, and they had to encase it in a big bubble and feed it methane and ammonia because that's what they eat, and then it could communicate through the elementals and through ESP. But as an individual, cell, that's what it looks like, shiny blue. He said it's beautiful. It looks like oily, not messy oily, but beautiful oily, this bubbly thing. And I love that picture. It's just beautiful. And the raptors do exactly look like that dinosaur. They evolved from the dinosaurs. They still look like dinosaurs. They're very proud to look like dinosaurs. They call themselves dragons, but they don't have wings. And they originated here on Earth. And Carrie, let's see, did Mark get your letter? I think he did. I think he did. I will ask him again to be sure. I know we were talking about you. We often do, and but I will double check because I can't remember. But I thought he did. So let's see. Okay, I'm just going to keep chatting unless more people come up with questions. So I'll have to say, when Mark was a young boy, he said he really began to understand that his father was more than just a procurement officer. Oh, this is a good story. His father's official title in the Air Force was procurement officer, and which is kind of funny because he was out dealing with UFOs all the time. And one of Mark's early alien incidences, this is after he'd already been at the conference. So I think sometime in 62, his dad was at a meeting. They were stationed in France. His dad was at a meeting with numerous military people, and my cat is having fun. And Mark's babysitter, who you know, her front or her side business, she was a stripper at, you know, what, I don't know if it was the Moulin Rouge, but she was a stripper in France, you know, one of the big clubs. And she was also Mark's bodyguard. They were driving somewhere, maybe to go meet his dad or whatever, and they got ambushed in like an alley or a side street or something. And some of the people were human, and some of them were actually non-human MIBs. And by three, Mark could handle a gun, but by 9, he was very proficient with guns. And so his poor babysitter got hit with an energy blast, and Mark's doing this gun battle with these aliens, and he actually saw the human face, you know, like basically not melt, dissolve, but, you know, he got to see the alien face under the human face of one of the MIBs. So he's had some really scary incidences even from the time he was a kid. So it's, you know, I'm just amazed he's lived through all of it. What about African looking ETs and Asian ETs? Well, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. Most of the humanoid ETs that I know about seem to be pretty white. Well, seem to be white looking. You hear about Nordics. So I would say most of the humanoid aliens are probably white. I haven't heard of any that look like African Americans or look like Asians. I do know that there's a reptilian species that evolved from the raptors, and so they are more human looking. And they're called the reptoids, not nice guys, working with ISIS. They, you know, work with a lot of terrorist stuff, like to wreak havoc. They have a base in Africa, and Mark, I don't think he's finished yet. I thought it was going to be a short book. Apparently not. Anyway, he's writing up a book about the Africa stuff going on and the sightings and the reptoid base there. But I don't know of any that look like African Americans specifically or Asians. So let's see, Carrie, I'm coming to visit again. Oh yeah, you're coming to visit us again when I come back from the UK. So yeah, I'm going to England in 2 weeks. And I can't wait. I love it there. I have 5 talks to give, 2 conferences and 2 other meetings. You know, I get to visit every time I go. I visit a new part. And sometimes it's to explore places that Mark's written about, and I want to get my own pictures, you know, where the conferences were and all that. And sometimes, so this time I'm going to Norfolk as my side trip because I have a friend that lives there now. And, you know, Queen Elizabeth has an estate there, and Prince William and Kate's house is there. And, you know, Norfolk just looks beautiful. So I'll get to take the train and go up through Cambridge and just see different parts of the England that I haven't seen before. And I'm going to spend a couple days playing in London. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I get a lot of joy from going over there because my ancestors are from there. So I think there was one more quote. Oh, I hope. I thought I had it. Oh, yeah. Because we're almost out of time. Any idea which races the Chinese are working with? Oh, dear. So Carrie, help me out if you can. I can't remember if he actually told Carrie and I the race that was working with the Chinese, because I think the reptoids are probably working with Obama, but the reptoids are probably working with Putin. The reptoids are working with ISIS, and I honestly can't remember which race he said is working with the Chinese, and I don't think it's the reptoids. There are other races that are coming through dimensional gates in the Middle East and Central Asia, and they're working with the terrorists there, and I don't think, I don't even know what race those are, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And I know we're kind of getting close to being out of time, but I want to read you a quote. This was at the same time Mark had the MIB experience. This is the kind of man that he and his father were. My father taught me that honor is a state of being, something we embody. It is not a commodity we turn on and off. Change comes about in the world one consciousness at a time. What we do as individuals affects all of us and our entire planet. I knew that my father was something more than a normal major in the United States Air Force, but I had also learned how to keep secrets by then. His official title was head of procurement at the station or the Lone Air Force Base. That was fine with me, but for some reason that meant we visited Paris a lot on official business. And I was starting to explore the world for myself. All the secrets I'd been so close to, but my father and his friends had been so fanatic about protecting me from, were about to open up to me. And those secrets included Nazi secrets, UFOs, enemy and friendly aliens, corrupt humans who had sold the enemy in the fight to save Earth from multiple extraterrestrial enemies. So, we've got a lot to cover over several weeks. I hope Project Camelot's TV is a huge success. I hope you get all your friends to listen to all the different shows. I am honored to be invited to be a guest. Please visit my website at www.edhca.org. You can email me. You can contact me through Facebook. You can call me. Whatever you want to do, I am here. I'm happy to listen and chat with you. And this has just been great. I've had a great time. And next week, we're going to talk about Hamilton Air Force Base and get into some specifics about different alien species, especially the Raptors, because I know a lot about them, and Mark's really good friends with them. And I just can't wait for you to know more about them. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. He's got a great sense of humor. He can tell a great story. I will just say that unequivocally, I know that all this stuff about UFOs and aliens is totally true. I have physical evidence around the house that it's true. And intuitively, especially after knowing this guy this long, I just know it's true. That being said, he didn't start off on our first date or even our first letter saying, hey, this is what I used to do in the military. He did say his dad was in the Air Force. I'm sure he told me he'd been in the military, and that's kind of where we left it. And we just got to know each other. And then, I'm doing some research for a family history. Can you look this up for me? Can you look that up? It's like, okay, sure. It's like, oh, Mark, why isn't my printer freezing when I'm trying to print something about your dad? Oh, I don't know. And then he started giving me reports that I started a publishing company through his mentoring. And because he used to be a publisher, he had some great front companies. He would use his talents to start businesses because he needed fronts. So he had a magazine, he had a movie company, he had a remodeling construction business. But anyway, he helped me start a publishing company in the late 90s. I published a couple of his fiction books that he's written. I published a newspaper and a literary magazine. A lot of fun, no money in it, but it was a lot of fun. And because, again, among anything else, the guy's an incredible writer, and he's known a lot of good writers in the prison system. So I used to, we used to help them out, and I would publish some of their stories. And, we like to help people. We like to educate people. Anyway, several years into this relationship, he started giving me reports, just happened to be involved with this, the weird case. Somebody worked for Bechtel, somebody's dad worked at Lawrence Livermore Lab, somebody's uncle, it just goes on and on and on. The tentacles just keep going out, and it was just crazy. But he had a lousy, his lawyer did a lousy job, and all the evidence was circumstantial. And at first they tried to say he was trying to overthrow Marin County, which was ludicrous. And then they just, dropped that and said he killed this guy because the guy owed him money. The guy did owe him money, but he wouldn't have killed him for $2,500. He was making plenty of money with his military stuff. So anyway, people always ask me how I got involved with Mark and all this UFO stuff. And they want me to write a book, and I'm sure I will. I've started it. But, you know, I grew up in the 50s where you watched UFO movies and the Martian invasion and the little kids and everybody would, the one, I can't even remember what it was, Invasion from Mars. And they walked to the end of this fence and they all, you know, dropped down into the earth. And, you know, that was my experience with UFOs. I watched these B-rated movies, and that was it. And then I forgot all about it. And then I meet Mark, and my roommate at the time came home. Her husband was in the same prison. So I met this guy whose mom was visiting today. He's really smart. He's friends with Ricky. Do you want to go see him? I said, sure, why not? Prison doesn't scare me. I've already visited your husband. I was visiting other people, you know, as a thing to do. So it was, I met Mark. We started writing, and then a couple of months later, in November, we started writing in September, and in November, we started visiting. So basically, we courted for 5 years. We've been married for 13 years. He's the smartest man I know. He's very kind. He's charming. There were probably actually, either if they didn't plan it from the beginning, the New World Order is totally behind him staying in prison. There were a lot of weird New World Order connections with the kids involved and the other people who